here in Geneva. We had very productive talks, and I believe that the venue here on Lake Geneva added great equanimity to what was a very positive process. We have reached an agreement on a 90-day pause and substantially moved down the tariff levels. Both sides on the reciprocal tariffs will move their tariffs down 115%. We had very robust discussions. And we both have an interest in balanced trade. The U.S. will continue moving towards that. I will let Ambassador Jameson talk about the President's initiatives that began on a historic announcement, trade announcement on January 20th, which no other president has ever done, following to April 2nd, when we implemented the reciprocal tariffs.
Thank you, Secretary, and I will echo your thanks to the Swiss government and Swiss officials for hosting us this weekend. The atmosphere was very conducive to discussions, and thanks to them, we were able to have very constructive and positive conversations with our Chinese counterparts, who clearly came to deal this week. The rapid nature that we were able to conduct and conclude these discussions is a testament to mutual understanding and mutual respect between the Chinese and U.S. sides. With respect to the U.S. Trade position, our interactions with China and the agreement today, please keep in mind that the United States trade deficit has ballooned over the past several years, ending up at $1.2 trillion deficit in goods as of the end of last year, which was an approximately 42% increase over a few years prior, when there was an $850 billion trade deficit at the beginning of the Biden administration. So that is a rapid and expansive increase in the trade deficit. And our view is that this is driven in large part by non-reciprocal trade, among other things, and the result has been offshoring of manufacturing and other negative impacts on the U.S. economy. And so on January 20th, when the President was inaugurated, he released the America First trade policy, which was comprehensive and flagged that he and actually directed agencies, including U.S. Trade Representative and others, to research this issue and to provide options, which we did, and the President elected to impose reciprocal tariffs on April 2 to address this national emergency of the trade deficit. There was a global baseline tariff accompanied by higher reciprocal tariffs for each country depending on the level and intensity of their trade surplus with the United States. In all of this, China was assigned a reciprocal tariff rate of 34%. China was the only country that chose to implement retaliation against the United States for this reciprocal tariff. All other countries, withheld and decided that they wanted to negotiate with the United States or simply not retaliate. And so we've been in detailed discussions with other countries for several weeks at this point. China, as you know, retaliated not only with tariffs but with disproportionate and asymmetrical non-tariff measures in order to maintain the effectiveness of the reciprocal tariff measures. The President increased our tariff rates to offset Chinese retaliation, and as you know, this escalated to a point where both sides had added 125% tariffs, and with the Chinese side, additional non-tariff measures. amounting to an embargo in some senses on trade, an effective embargo, which of course was not a sustainable practice for either side. And so today, with this agreement, we come to agreement that that our reciprocal tariff rate will go down to 10% on the United States side, so it goes down 115%. We enter into a 90-day pause period for negotiations, which both the Chinese and the United States are very committed to. And the Chinese on their side also go down 115% to 10%, and they remove the countermeasures that they have in place. To be very clear, other measures that the United States has put in place in the past, whether it's tariff measures from 2018 or since, tariffs under other statutory authorities, tariffs related to fentanyl, those remain unchanged for now to the side. I'll just make one point, is that both the Chinese and the United States agreed to work constructively together on fentanyl, and there's a positive path forward there as well.
Okay, great. So let's start with some questions.
Well, just if I may make a few final remarks to give you framing and context. I think throughout the trade process, we have had a plan, we have a process in place, and now with the Chinese, after this weekend, we have a mechanism for continued talks. So process, plan, and mechanism. I would say one of the big takeaways from this weekend, the United States will continue a strategic rebalancing in many areas that were exposed as supply chain weaknesses during COVID, whether it's medicines, whether it's semiconductors, steel, the other, we've identified 5 or 6 strategic industries and supply chain vulnerabilities, and we will continue moving toward U.S. independence or reliable supplies from allies on those. But the consensus from both delegations this weekend is neither side wants a decoupling. And what had occurred with these very high tariffs, as Ambassador Greer said, was the equivalent of an embargo, and neither side wants that. We do want trade. We want more balanced trade, and I think that both sides are committed to achieving that. We would like to see China open to more U.S. goods. We expect that as the negotiations proceed, that there will also be a possibility of purchase agreements to pull what is our largest bilateral trade deficit into balance that has gotten out of balance. And much of this has happened through neglect over the past 4 years, as the previous administration did not engage on this issue. That was put forward to us by the Chinese, in fact, and we can see it in what happened to the Phase 1 agreement. We are only looking forward, and we look forward to very good discussions now that we have the mechanism created in Geneva this weekend for talks.
Great. And with that, let's kick off questions. I'll start at the front row. Jenny, Leonard, Bloomberg.
Thank you so much. Going into these talks, the president posted on Truth Social that he believes an 80% tariff on China seems right. It obviously went down substantially more. How did you end up going to 30%? Was that the president pushing you, or the Chinese not budging before you went down? And then secondly, you have a 90-day pause now, as you have with other countries. What specifically do you want to see in those 90 days? What kind of progress do you want to see in those 90 days and have agreed to by then to not ratchet up the tariffs? Because it is just a pause, right?
Yes, so
the tariffs then snap back, basically, if you don't have something agreed upon that is substantive?
So the Chinese April 2nd number was 34, continues to be 34%. I'll let Ambassador Greer answer the first question. And just like with all our other trading partners, as long as there is good faith effort, engagement, and constructive dialogue, then we will keep moving forward.
I would just say, Jenny, with respect to, the president's message and ultimate rates, I mean, everything is a negotiation, right? And the president, he gives the Secretary of the Treasury and I and other members of the cabinet direction and advice on how to proceed. And we ended up at a result that is very good for the United States, very good for China as well. We retain our 10% global baseline tariff, which we have on other countries. We have, in addition to that, previous measures that we've retained, which have been, frankly, effective in reducing the U.S. bilateral trade deficit with China over the past few years. So that leaves us in a very good position all in with respect to measures on Chinese imports, but more importantly, leaves us in a constructive path forward to have a positive conversation with the Chinese on how to rebalance and have more constructive trade.
Great. In the back, Associated Press.
Associated Press. Hi, I'm Jamie from Associated Press. We just heard our colleague talk about 30% tariffs. I'm just trying to understand these numbers here because they're all over the place. We were at 145 before, apparently, and 125, I believe, from the Chinese side. So can you say clearly now that, I think the question was, right now for the 90-day period, the U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods will be down to 30%? Is that correct for the 30?
So again, this agreement is really about the reciprocal tariff, which was imposed by the United States on April 2nd, and the escalatory steps which followed. Those on each side, the Chinese side and U.S. side, ended up at 125% on each other. The Chinese had additional non-tariff countermeasures. That has all come down by 115% to 10% each. The United States earlier this year imposed 20% related to fentanyl. That still exists. So if you're looking at Trump Term 2, tariffs on China, right now effective, it's 30%. There are prior measures which change by product, by sector, by level, et cetera. You can't really give a specific number on that right now. What matters for the agreement today is that we each agreed to come down on the reciprocal tariff and related retaliation to 10%. So a reduction of 115% down to 10%. Fentanyl is on its own track, but on a very positive track where we're having very constructive conversations with our Chinese counterparts.
And I would add a couple of things. This does not include any sector-specific tariffs that have been put across all of our trading partners. And as the ambassador said, I think he would agree with me that the upside surprise for me from this weekend was the level of Chinese engagement on the fentanyl crisis in the United States. They brought the Deputy Minister for Public Safety, who is not traditionally part of the trade team or the negotiating team, and he had a very robust and highly detailed discussion with someone from the U.S. National Security team.
Great. Next, John Huddy with Newsmax.
Mr. Secretary, will there be any immediate impact that U.S. consumers will see from this? And what was the toughest part of the talks? The Chinese are, notorious for being very difficult negotiators. Was there any moment that you felt the talks could break down? And as far as the fentanyl, I'm sorry, I know there's three questions here, but what are the Chinese willing to do in terms of the fentanyl crisis? Did they make any promises or any agreements to combat fentanyl?
Okay. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So let me recap that. So you're asking U.S. consumers, the last one was fentanyl, and what was the second question?
The toughest part of the negotiation.
Well, I'll start there first. Both sides represented their national interest well, but we also concluded that we had shared interest and that neither side was interested in a decoupling. And again, a lot of back and forth on various differences in views on fair trade. We informed them, I had a discussion that trade deficits are a result of three things. One, terms of trade. Two, currency. And then three, the United States fiscal position. We informed them that Trump administration is working very hard on containing this out-of-control fiscal deficit that we inherited from the previous administration. Two, there was no discussion on currency. And one, it was on terms of trade. And on fentanyl, again, for the first time, there was engagement between two teams with detailed knowledge. And I think for the first time, the Chinese understood the magnitude of what is happening in the U.S. in 2018 in Buenos Aires. They did a good job of banning the actual fentanyl, but what we have seen is substantial interaction between bad Chinese actors and many North American drug dealers, especially Mexican cartels. Treasury has designated several of the Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. We made that clear to the Chinese. They were very receptive. As you may or may not know, the Chinese have very draconian measures for the sale of illicit narcotics in China, and we have asked them to be equally as draconian with the people who are poisoning Americans.
And let me make a point. You know, your question about what was the toughest part of the negotiation, I would submit it was actually, you know, in the lead up to the negotiation, trying to repair channels of communication that had atrophied under the last administration, where, you know, our office, for example, the Office of the United States Trade Representative, had almost no substantive discussions with the Chinese side on trade. And although we have significant differences with the Chinese on trade and economics, and we have major complaints, you have to discuss these complaints. You have to have a channel for discussions, and overcoming that was a substantial challenge. And a lot of work went into that over the past several weeks, so that by the time we got here, we were able to be very pragmatic with each other. And to be sure, there were tough things to deal with on, you know, the level of removal, the timing for implementation, managing each side's, you know, domestic politics, et cetera. You know, and I won't go into too much detail. But I would say the toughest part was simply getting to a position where we could, in good faith, both sides work with each other. And once we did, we were able to do this in a couple of days. This is not the first time I've done trade negotiations with the Chinese, and sometimes it can take a very, very long time to overcome misunderstandings. We were able to do that effectively over the past few weeks, which enabled us to be very pragmatic and effective this weekend.
And I think we leave with a very good mechanism to avoid the unfortunate escalations as we saw after April 2nd from happening again. What had been very unusual about the relationship was that President Trump, Party Chairman Xi, they have a good relationship, but that the nature of what has happened since April 2nd could have been avoided if we had had this kind of mechanism in place, and I believe it is in place now. I think we leave today with a process that will move forward, and again, great mutual respect for our Chinese counterparts. I believe they showed us the same.
And the impact on U.S. consumers, see any resulting
mean, you're the Treasury Secretary, so you're better suited. But I would say on the front end, there's been a lot of talk about impact on consumers that just never really translate to the numbers. Consumption remained high, et cetera. And so I think what we're going to see is that we're going to have our economy continue taking off as we put structure around these negotiations and get global trade into a better place.
And as I reiterated last week, the Trump economic plan is 3 pieces: trade, tax, and deregulation. Trade has been implemented first, and that process is occurring. We believe that the tax portion is going very well. Speaker Johnson, Leader Thune, who I am in constant contact with, believe that midsummer we will pass, as the President likes to call it, his one big beautiful bill, and we believe that that will provide substantial relief for American households. And then deregulation, a hidden and pernicious tax on American households, is regulation. We believe that the last administration added several $1,000s a year to American families' cost, and that we will be not only cutting those rolling that back, but cutting those substantially.
Thanks. I think we have time for about maybe 2 or 3 more questions. The most, sorry, ma'am, name and outlook, please.
Yeah, it's June Folks, BBC. It's very heartening what you're telling us. I'm wondering whether you think it might be a better idea to start at this point of negotiation rather than start with the big list of tariffs and all the global turmoil that caused and the fear, frankly, in some countries around the world. How about, do you think with hindsight might have been better to reach out and say we want to talk to you guys about this?
No, I disagree entirely. We have spent decades at the World Trade Organization in multilateral and bilateral negotiations trying to get other countries to reduce their tariffs and non-tariff barriers to be more reciprocal with the U.S. We've had one of the most open economies for decades. The promise of the WTO and the multilateral system is that everyone was going to come down. It turns out the U.S. went down significantly. There were other economies that had low tariffs as well, but retained very high non-tariff barriers. We have tried really hard to work within the system, and the net result is a $1.2 trillion deficit in goods. The net result is manufacturing went to China, East Asia, Mexico, et cetera. So we've tried all of that. So the idea that we can just keep saying, well, why don't we just talk a little bit more and we'll have a different outcome, I think just is totally detached from reality.
And I would add a couple of things, that as our 18 important trading partners come to us, many with very good deals, as the UK, who skipped to the front of the line as our oldest ally, as Ambassador Greer and I look at their proposals, again, to lower tariffs, to lower the non-tariff trade barriers. Obviously, UK does not have a currency manipulation problem. And the subsidies for labor and industry, we look at these, and I think, how did we get here? How did we get here? And I echo part of what President Trump said, that he doesn't blame the other economies for taking advantage of a fluid, taking advantage of the situation when they were allowed to do it. He blames previous U.S. leaders. So we are just trying to restore a healthy equilibrium. That the U.S. economy has become very unbalanced. On one side, we have a forward-leaning, the deepest and widest financial markets in the world. We have financial innovation. We have the tech sector that is the envy in the world. On the other side, we are a natural resources economy led by energy. So it is a barbell, but in between, precision manufacturing, especially precision manufacturing, has been wiped out, and it is our intent to bring that back. So we want to rebalance, and I think that there is a big opportunity. If I think about this weekend, The Chinese, they have gone the other way. They are unbalanced in terms of overproduction in the manufacturing sector. They have stated, but have not yet rebalanced toward a more consumption-oriented economy. And there is a chance, if we can open up trade to China, have more fair trade toward the U.S., that we could rebalance together. So I reject the notion that business as usual would have worked.
Great, and I think this will be our last question as we're just about out of time. Swiss outlet, Urs Geringer with Dirk Walsh.
Yes, I have a question in regard of the setting of these very successful talks as we hear. Switzerland has been in the center for international conferences for many decades. In recent times, we've been under tremendous pressure. The ambassador of Joe Biden to Switzerland called Switzerland the hole in the donut. My question is, how high does your administration value reliable Swiss neutrality for conferences or meetings as we just witnessed this weekend?
Well, I won't speak for the previous ambassador. My neighbor in Charleston, South Carolina, is the ambassador under President Trump, Ambassador Ed McMullen, who was highly respected here. He continues to engage with the Swiss American Foundation, and he has led this administration's effort to re-engage with Switzerland after the past 4 years. So we value the relationship. I believe Switzerland is now one of maybe the 6th largest investor in the U.S., which is incredible for an economy with 9 million people. We hope that Switzerland will bring some of its very robust trade training programs to the U.S. as we re-engage the manufacturing sector, because I believe the U.S. has a lot to learn from Switzerland. And again, the U.K. and Switzerland have moved to the front of the queue for the trade deals, whereas the EU has been much slower. So we value that also.
And I would say, with respect to the negotiating dynamics, and this may not seem important to those not involved in this, but the atmospherics provided by the Swiss government were incredibly conducive to the conclusions we had this weekend. They allowed us to use the grounds of the residence of the Swiss ambassador to the United Nations, which had a very intimate internal rooms, and importantly for us, where a lot of the key negotiations happened. We're outside under a large, beautiful tree on a set of patio sofas, frankly, where we had the most important discussions on the most challenging issues. And having this setting, as opposed to, no offense to the Intercontinental, which has been great, as opposed to a sterile hotel conference situation or conference rooms, I think let us develop a personal relationship with our counterparts and lead to the successful conclusion we had.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. I think that's it for us in time today. Thank you so much for coming out. And
Thank you.
economy that would work. That would hurt the pay packets of working people without question. But at the same time, we do have to ask why parts of our economy seem almost addicted to importing cheap labour, rather than investing in the skills of people who are here and want a good job in their community. Sectors like engineering, where visas have rocketed while apprenticeships have plummeted. Is that fair to Britain? Is that fair to young people, weighing up their future to miss out on those apprentices? To see colleges in their community almost entirely dedicated to one-year courses for overseas students? No, I don't think that it is. And truth be told, I don't think anybody does. Yet that is the Britain this broken system has created. So as this white paper sets out, every area of the immigration system, work, family and study, will be tightened up so we have more control. Skill requirements raised to degree level. English language requirements across all routes, including for dependents. The time it takes to acquire settled status extended from 5 years to 10. And enforcement tougher than ever, because fair rules must be followed. Now, make no mistake, this plan means migration will fall. That's a promise. But I want to be very clear on this. If we do need to take further steps, if we do need to do more to release pressure on housing and our public services, then mark my words, we will. But it's not just about numbers, because the chaos of the previous government also changed the nature of immigration in this country. Fewer people who make a strong economic contribution, more who work in parts of our economy that put downward pressure on wages. So perhaps the biggest shift in this white paper is that we will finally honour what take back control meant and begin to choose who comes here, so that migration works for our national interest. You know, this is where the whole debate is skewed, as if some people think controlling immigration is reining in a sort of natural freedom, rather than the basic and reasonable responsibility of government to make choices that work for a nation's economy. And for years, this seems to have muddled our thinking. But let me be clear, it ends now. We will create a migration system that is controlled, selective, and fair. A clean break with the past that links access to visas directly to investment in homegrown skills. So that if a business wants to bring people in from abroad, they must first invest in Britain. But also, so settlement becomes a privilege that is earned, not a right. Easier if you make a contribution, if you work, pay in, and help rebuild our country. Now, some people may even be against that. But I think for the vast majority of people in this country, that is what they have long wanted to see. An immigration system that is fair, that works for our national interest, and that restores common sense and control to our borders. That is what this white paper will deliver. Lower net migration, higher skills, backing British workers. The start of repairing our social contract, which the chaos and cynicism of the last government did so much to undermine. Thank you. I will now take a number of questions from the media. I've got a hopefully accurate list here, starting with Chris Mason, BBC.
Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Chris Mason, BBC News. Let's be clear, are you promising today that net migration will fall every year between now and the next election, come what may?
Well, I'm promising it will fall significantly, and I do want to get it down by the end of this Parliament significantly. That is what this plan is intended to achieve, the complete opposite of what you saw in the last 4 years. It is frankly incredible that net migration quadrupled in 4 short years to nearly 1 million. This white paper, these plans bring it back into control, make sure it's controlled, that is selective, that we decide who comes to this country, and that it is fair. And that's what we will do, significant reduction in immigration. And as I've indicated, if it becomes necessary to take further measures, then that's what we will do. Thank you. Robert, ITV.
Robert Beston, ITV. Prime Minister, you know that countries that want to grow are in a global race for top talent. Your #1 priority is growth. Haven't you shot yourself in the foot by insisting that those who want to be citizens now have to live here twice as long as those who want to be American citizens? And if I may, we've just heard that there will be a 90-day massive reduction in the tariffs that China and America are imposing on each other. Are you relieved that at least temporarily they've laid down their economic arms?
Well, let me take both those points. I'm not encouraging 2 questions each because we've got to just get through this. On the growth question, I do think this is worth taking some time on, because the theory that higher migration numbers necessarily leads to higher growth has been tested in the last 4 years. So we've had the highest net migration when the last government lost control to nearly 1 million, and stagnant growth. And so that link doesn't hold on that evidence. The second thing is that this white paper is not just a white paper on immigration, it's also a white paper that deals with skills and training. And one of the reasons that we've had stagnant growth, in my view, for years, is because we've underinvested chronically in skills and growth. So by putting skills and growth into the same plan as migration, which is something businesses have been asking for years, you actually answer the growth question as well. And I should say, as a footnote to that, as you heard in the speech and you'll see in the white paper, in relation to high talent, where we want the very best into the country, we will have routes to get that talent into this country. And I think there's real potential for us to do so in the current environment, and we intend to do so. On the question of the China tariffs, I just saw something flash up in the room back there. I'm not across the complete detail. I'm very pleased, obviously, that we struck our trade deal with the US last week, which will be measured in very many thousands of jobs and billions of pounds into our economy. Thank you, Robert. Sam from Sky. Sam.
Sam Coates, Sky News. Prime Minister, just to pick up on growth and migration, one of the reasons that we've had a laxer migration policy for years is because of basically the Treasury view. Successive chancellors, their fiscal rules, and the way that that interacts with the official forecasts means it's always been an easy win to have more growth by having more people in the country. What's your message today to the Treasury, to the OBR, and are you doing anything to actually change the way that they work and look at all this stuff and calculate the cost-benefit analysis of growth and migration?
Yeah, well, thank you, Sam. Just succinctly, and then adding to the answer I just gave. Firstly, the pure theory, if you like, that simply higher migration numbers necessarily leads to higher growth, I think has been tested in the last 4 years. We quadrupled in actually a very short period of time. And, you know, I think whatever political persuasion you are, it is quite extraordinary that net migration quadrupled in 4 years. We've never seen that before in this country, but growth didn't shift. It stayed stagnant. Secondly, this point about skills and migration, what businesses have been calling out for a long time is link migration to the skills and training that we need in this country. In the past, governments have done sort of knee-jerk reductions without making that link. We're making that link in this paper, which is really important in terms of where we go with the economy, because I do think it's underinvestment in those areas that's caused a lot of the problem. The other thing that the paper is doing is readjusting the model, because it's got to a place now where there's many more low skilled jobs rather than high skilled jobs. So by adjusting the threshold for skills, this allows migration to be in the areas of high skills, which are more likely to make a significant contribution to our economy. Thank you very much, Sam. I've got Gary from Channel 4.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Have you been on a bit of a journey yourself on this? Did you used to believe that higher immigration led to higher growth? Would Keir Starmer a few years ago have talked about an island of strangers. Are you one of the people who now thinks that Article 8 of the ECHR is actually a problem and not something that's just exaggerated by other people?
Well, Gary, thank you very much. I invite you to dig out my conference speech at Labour Party conference. I know you remember them all. But 3 years ago now, I think it was, when I made the very political argument that I've made this morning, which is that take back control, understanding why you need control, selection of fair immigration is a Labour argument. And once you've dug out that transcript, there's then the speech I made to the CBI, I think about 3 years ago, making the same argument in relation to business, saying too many businesses, in my view, are too dependent on migration rather than training and skilling up people in this country. And that was, I was signalling to the CBI then that would change under a Labour government. So there's a core consistency through here. On Article 8, yeah, we do want to ensure that the right balance is made in migration cases in relation to the national interest. There's a balance set out in legislation already. That needs to be adjusted, in my view, and that's what we will do. Thank you, Gary. Chris Hope, sorry. There's a lot of Chris's.
Chris Hope, GB News. Prime Minister, we've been here before, haven't we? There have been 3 immigration acts since 2014. The Immigration Act in 2014 and 2016 both aimed to reduce immigration. They both failed. Why on earth should GB News viewers think you're going to succeed? And why not give us a promise right now? Why give us a fixed target right now, not a promise, so we can judge you on success? The Tories at least did that, but they failed.
Well, look, the difference here, this is the most comprehensive plan that has been put forward. It's been forward to end the Tory sort of one open borders experiment that we have had. You're right about that. And it looks at all routes, and it's comprehensive. And it does the hard yards of linking skills and business to what we need to do with the economy. So it's not a narrow look just at the numbers. It puts them in their proper context. On the question, which we do want to significantly reduce migration, I'm absolutely making clear that's what it will do, and that if we need to go further, we will. So that's the promise I make to your viewers. I don't think it's sensible to put a hard-edged cap on it. That has been done in one form or another for the best part of 10 years by different prime ministers. The only thing that links those prime ministers and the various caps or quotas or limits they put in place is every single one of them failed. And therefore, going down the failed route is not a sensible way for me. As with everything that I do, serious, pragmatic, looking at the things that will actually make a material difference. Thank you, Chris. Jerry from The Times.
Prime Minister Jerry Scott from The Times. What is your message to the 9 million inactive adults in the UK at the moment who might not think that they should take work in a care home, for example, and also to some of your Labour MPs who might be squeamish about Labour government taking a tough line on immigration? Well,
firstly, that's acknowledged within that 9 million. There are some people who can't work, and we need to be clear about that from the start. But there are others who can, and as we've set out in our welfare provisions, the principles are clear. Where people can't work and are unlikely to be able to work, they should be protected and supported. But where people can get into work, they should be supported. The current system does the opposite, and so we will support them into work with a £1 billion package, the right to try, and measures like that. And that if you can work, you should work. And I do think that this white paper should be seen in conjunction with what we're doing on welfare. And on squeamishness, I actually think that the Labour Party has as core values the idea that immigration should be controlled, that it should be selective. We should be choosing who we want, higher skills, the high talent routes into our country. And it must be fair. They're basic Labour arguments and concepts for many, many years. Thank you. I've got Jack from The Sun. Jack.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You said just now this is a comprehensive plan to bring down legal migration. You also said in the election you had a comprehensive plan to bring down illegal migration. And so far it seems that isn't working. Small boat crossings are going up on your watch. So why should voters think that your plan to bring down legal migration will fare any better, especially given you're considering an EU youth mobility scheme, which could actually increase it?
Well, let's tackle that head on, because nobody should be getting in a small boat to cross over the channel and illegally entering this country. The last government lost control of the borders. It falls to this government to clear up that mess in the same way we're clearing up all the other messes that they left behind. I am convinced that the way to do that is to take down the gangs that are running the vile trade. And for that reason, we've drafted and put before Parliament a borders bill, which follows through on the promises I made, which is we need to give law enforcement greater powers, going down the counter-terrorism powers. The thing that distinguishes counter-terrorism from other law enforcement is you can take action earlier. You can be preemptive. You can operate in a completely different way. That's why we've gone for a package that allows law enforcement to get in much earlier. That is going through Parliament. Who is voting against that? The Tories, who caused the problem in the first place. Thank you, Jack. Martin from the Daily Mail. Martin.
Prime Minister Martin Beckford from the Daily Mail. Gary asked if you've been on a journey on net migration. Similarly, you talked about tough enforcement. One of today's measures is for foreign nationals convicted of any offence to be considered for deportation. Yet just 5 years ago, you signed a letter calling for the halt to a deportation flight that contained, amongst others, 2 people convicted of rape and 3 of GBH. Your views have changed, haven't they?
No, I've always said that those who commit offences should be deported. I ran the Crown Prosecution Service for 5 years between 2008 and 2013, and it fell to my prosecutors on my instructions to ask for the deportations in the first place in the Crown courts. So I've been really clear. I've been in charge of cases where we routinely asked for the judge, because that's the way the system operated in those days, to add to the sentence an order at the end that there should be a deportation. So what's that? That's going back the best part of 20 years. Thank you very much. And I've got Michael from the Daily Express.
Thank you.
Michael.
Does going further mean disentangling ourselves from the ECHR and disapplying human rights laws in immigration cases?
No. I don't think that is necessary. I also remind myself that the international agreements we've signed have given us the basis for the deals that we've struck on illegal migration. So the Home Secretary has moved fast, working with other countries, to put in place materially improved deals with other countries in relation to migration. That would not have been possible if we had been saying at the same time we're about to withdraw from our international obligations. I could give you many more examples than that, but you can't strike those deals with other countries to work more closely together on law enforcement to smash the gangs and to work on returns agreements, which is what we want to do, if in the next breath you're saying you don't believe in international law. If you do, you can strike the deals. If you don't, you can't. And one of the features of the last government is they struggled to strike these deals because other countries said, if you don't comply with international law, why should we write and agree an international agreement with you, which to me is plain common sense. Thank you very much. Thank you.